Hello YouTubers, Joe Kersey here on Monday, August 14th, 2017 at 15:25 in the afternoon Eastern Time. Having a little Guinness here. Dedicate this one to my favorite Guinness drinker, several thousand miles across the sea, let's put it that way. Now today's title is Vertigo. Today I want to tell you a story. Well, actually a couple of 3 stories, or 4 maybe, depending on how things go. The title of this is I Am Not the Hiccup Doctor and I Am Not the Hard-On Doctor. There would occasionally develop, when a patient's under anesthesia, hiccups. Typically that happened when somebody was messing around up under the diaphragm, or tugging on something up in the upper abdomen, like say if they pulled the stomach down to try to get around the tape around the esophagus, the esophagogastric junction. And sometimes that, people would get hit, they'd hiccup. Oh, you can't hear them because they got an endotracheal tube in place. Now the problem with hiccups is that essentially, short of killing them by massive overdoses of the primary anesthetic agent, particularly if you're doing a primarily inhalational technique, you can't stop them. I mean, it's a very basic, primitive reflex. Also, the neuromuscular blocking drugs, sometimes more commonly called muscle relaxants, short of essentially way overdosing the person with more than they require for surgical muscle relaxation, you can't stop it. You just can't stop it. But of course, the surgeon who has just yanked something down and gotten the hiccups going, he looks over the screen at you and goes, "Make those stop." Yeah. And so you're kind of obliged to try something, I suppose. There's a whole bunch of folklore about how you stop hiccups under anesthesia. Because there are about 20 or 25 of these things, that means that occasionally some of them might work, or they might work by just sheer random chance. There's no way to posit causation. One of the common ones is just you just slide you take an not an endotracheal tube, but a nasogastric tube and stick it in their nostril and sort of tickle the upper oropharynx with that, or the back of the nasopharynx, more accurately with that. Okay, a variant of that is you put your finger in their mouth and run it up and rotate your arm so that you're kind of massaging up there with your fingertip. Then it's like drug therapy. Either give them more muscle relaxants, neuromuscular blocker, or give them more inhalation agent. But see, that sets you down a bad path in the recovery room. Takes longer to wake up, takes longer to recover from neuromuscular blockade, and the tendency is to not adequately reverse the neuromuscular blocking drug anyway, so you've got a partially paralyzed patient kind of gasping away in the recovery room. The other really common one that they like you to try, and which sometimes seem to work, but not all that often, again, there's no way to posit causation. Was to give them Thorazine, chlorpromazine. When you give chlorpromazine to somebody, one thing happens all the time. They drop their blood pressure. I mean, they drop their blood pressure. If you give it to them while they're conscious, it settles them right down, believe you me. There were several times I had to give Thorazine to patients who woke up with just emergence delirium, wild emergence delirium. And if these were really large guys, typically very large men, strong men, like 6'6", 280-pound muscular guys, they're a threat to themselves. They're also, but more often, they're really a threat to the recovery room personnel because they get violent. So you use them in those circumstances, but you'd also use it sometimes to try to stop them hiccuping. What that does is, of course, it means that it's going to delay this person becoming fully awake for between 8 to 12 hours, and nobody wants somebody to stay in recovery room for 8 to 12 hours. Insurance companies don't. The hospital doesn't because of staffing considerations. I don't because it's I've done something bad to the patient and I didn't want to do that anyway. I mean, it's a no-win situation. But nonetheless, occasionally, they look upon you as the hiccup doctor. Make them stop. The other time where you really actually do have to really make them stop is during eye surgery. If you have them asleep during open eye surgery, you just can't have them doing that during open eye surgery. You can't have them cough either during eye surgery. The other case would be if they're doing something really, some real delicate dissection in the chest around the pulmonary artery or pulmonary vein, or the vena cava for that matter. I mean, then you really do have to stop them making any sort of diaphragmatic movement at all. So, nonetheless, my assertion stands. I am not the hiccup doctor. Oh, excuse me. Bubbles blowing down on my vocal cord. I'm also not the hard-on doctor. Now, leaving aside what I like to do in my spare time, in my professional life, I'm not the hard-on doctor. And typically what would happen is, during neurologic cases, these guys often are sort of pulling on the penis and, kind of almost jacking it off, and, some guys would get a major erection that would absolutely not go away. Again, regardless of what you did, increased anesthesia, particularly if you're using an inhalation technique. Neuromuscular blocking drugs aren't any use in this circumstance. There was really only one thing that sometimes worked, but again, I'm not going to say more often than not. I mean, it sometimes did work. Was nitroglycerine ointment. Nitroglycerin, can be administered in many ways. It can be intravenously as a liquid. There's a 2% cream. You put it on, and you put a piece of paper over it, and it gets absorbed through the skin. And it was the cream that was used in these circumstances. And they'd essentially rub the nitroglycerin on the penis and see if it would get the veins to dilate up enough, because it's primarily a venous dilator. Get the veins to dilate up enough that then the blood flow would go out of the penis and the erection would go down. That worked probably 60% of the time, but nitroglycerin also drops your blood pressure. And so first of all, you're generally taking a fragile old guy anyway who's got this major erection going on. You're more or less kind of trying to jack him off with nitroglycerin, and his blood pressure bottoms out, which is not what you want to do to an elderly guy that probably has underlying cardiovascular disease anyway. Again, kind of a no-win situation, but they didn't end up staying in the recovery room for hours on end after some of the maneuvers you did for the hiccups. And this happened whether you had spinal anesthesia or not. You can have them under a spinal or an epidural, and they'll still get erections. I mean, it happens. I mean, there it is. Now, admittedly, I'd say probably you'd get about maybe 25 to 30% of some of these guys would get erections. So it wasn't all that big of a problem, but. Again, they give you the look, make it go down, make it go away. He's like, I'm not the hard-on doctor. I'm not. I said, if anything, you're the hard-on doctor, to the urologist. Fun in the operating room, huh? Yeah, I just wanted to have my say on that. That's always been kind of lurking in the back of my mind. And I got talking about that with somebody the other day, and I don't know who it was. Oh, I was talking about my friend Mike. I went on and on about that for a while. I said, I guess I've had very strong feelings about this, and I'm kind of suppressed. Okay, you guys have a good day, and I'm going to say bye-bye, YouTubers. Where's my thing? Here.